Thank you for joining. How's everyone doing this evening? Good? Ready for the weekend ahead? Almost kind of coming on the horizon. Michael, you still in Bali? We're all jealous of you over there.
I'm still here, but I'm trying to get back to the States so that jealousy can subside.
Okay. Can swap places.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, we'll give it a minute for people to join here, and then we'll kick it off and begin the session. Where's everyone calling in from besides Bali? Chat rolling. Let's see.
The
Okay.
internet. Oh, we've got some funny ones out there.
Keeping us on our toes, Scott.
And I feel like I want to be playing Battleship with Scott at the same time. I like that.
Oh, we got a Hawaii too.
Well, if that one wasn't already sunk, you'd be in trouble because that was a Battleship.
Right. Looks like it.
All right, cool. Well, we'll kick it off so we can make the most of our time here, and I'll just share my screen. I just have a few slides to properly introduce our guest here tonight. Can I just get a thumbs up if you can see the slide? Cool. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is the last Communicating Your Value session of the month. Happy to have you all here. We're going to cover salary and negotiation, a favorite topic of mine and hopefully yours as well, and I'm sure of Lisa. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Lisa. She has over 20 years of experience as a recruiting manager. She's led successful teams through major changes. And now, especially with COVID and our pandemic and the most challenging times we've had, she's shifted to being a founder and CEO of Lisa Virtue Coaching. So I put a few of her bullets here on the slide. As you can see, she's an international career coach and job strategist by day, mom by most everyday, weekend, holidays, days off, recovering extreme sports athlete, and wildly in love with nature and the arts. So I want to turn it over to you, Lisa, to add a little color yourself as well and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Christy. So I've been up and down the West Coast. So if any of you are on the West Coast, San Diego, I was there for about 3 years. I see Jonathan's coming from there. And the reason I was up and down the West Coast was for my job, those first 20 years of the career, like Christy mentioned. And so mostly everything was service-based. So athletics, wellness, fitness. If you look at my LinkedIn bio, you'll see a lot of those past experiences. And sometimes doing extreme sports for my job, and got some major injuries along the way. That's why I call myself a recovering extreme sport athlete. So sometimes I'll jump on a snowboard. I might do some flow boarding in San Diego on the artificial waves. But now I love my paddleboard. And so I'm sometimes get sad how easygoing my sports are. But water polo was my baby. That was my favorite thing to coach. So I've been coaching since teenager and helping people learn a lot of different athletic skills and mindset around athletic and wellness programs. And so along the way, I also had a lot of colleagues and family members and people that worked for me, a lot of part-time staff that were looking for their long-term career would kind of gravitate to me and have me help them with their resume or help them with their networking, whatever the case may be. So last year during the pandemic, when I had a big opportunity to figure out what did I want to do on my day-to-day, because my current day job was just not hacking it with everything going on and being a mom and having an aging parent all of a sudden move in with us. A lot of things changed in my world. And so I did my own soul searching and realized that anytime I helped out a colleague along the way, or someone working with me or for me, that gave me the most fulfillment. So I'm one of those people that loves to talk to people all day. My husband is the opposite. He's a financial analyst and he's like, please less water cooler talk. If I never have to go back to the office, fantastic. And so now I keep kicking him out because we share an office. So that's a little bit about me. Been doing this for a year now full time and loved every second of it. Also chose to get certified and just add to the depth of my knowledge, and became part of a network of career coaches around the country. So yeah, that's how I came to be with you guys today. And actually that network is how I found Christy and Curtis, and had one of the other coaches recommend me to fill in for her today. So I'm thrilled to be here. I like to talk about money. Some people, it makes them very uncomfortable. And I always tell my clients when we first start talking, we're going to talk about money and start getting used to it, because that is part of the reason you work, right? You need to get paid.
Absolutely. You got to get it out there, right?
Yep.
Awesome, Lisa. Well, thank you. So first and foremost, I wanted to just kind of bring up for the agenda for the night, we'll cover about 20 so minutes of moderated conversation and some questions. If you guys have any questions along the way during that time period, feel free to raise your hand or throw the question in the chat, and then we'll open it up. We'll use the good majority of the time for you all to ask, have this time to ask Lisa questions as well, but we'll just kick it off with a few questions, and then we'll share Lisa's information as well at the end and some valuable tips for you guys to take away today. So one of the things I wanted to start off with it, because here at Shift, we really, one of the basis of our Career Accelerator program is telling your story, right? Your own personal narrative. And we think it's one of the most important parts of landing an interview and going throughout the interview process, right? And then ultimately getting that job offer, and getting that job offer for something that is aligned with the salary expectations that you want. All that being said, I don't want to glaze over the fact that you are also a storyteller yourself and an author, a book author.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I wasn't expecting that, but you're right. So
yes.
I had a COVID baby. I'll show you all. And it's a children's book that my daughter and I created called Career Mama. So you'll see that all over my LinkedIn and Instagram. But this, man, what a project. The illustrator is from Malta, a young woman out there. And anyway, I have a ton of stories about creating a story. So very proud of it, and about to launch a little campaign. So if any of you want to become friends with me on LinkedIn, I accept all new friend requests, please do. And then you'll see some career mom stories from women around the country. It's a gratitude book from the eyes of the daughter.
I love that. I love that. Yes, we will all have to check that out. So thank you for sharing that. Question for you. So along the lines of storytelling, as a storyteller yourself, how can it be used to benefit us in the negotiation process once you receive the offer?
Yeah, perfect. It's, it goes hand in hand with explaining the why during the negotiation. So I'm going to drop 3 takeaways I want you all to, if you don't remember anything else, just write this down or grab it from chat. Know your minimum. Okay, we all have a minimum salary that we need to have to pay our bills. So know your minimum, know your role. And when I say that, it's the job that you're going to get the offer for. Know how that fits within the structure of the organization. Know what your story, like Christy's saying, led up to that negotiation stage, right? So know your role, and then know the comps. So we'll go into that a little bit more throughout the session, but you should know what those jobs are paying at comparable organizations.
Absolutely. Okay. So know your minimum, know your role, know your comps, and we'll dive a little bit more into that as well. So let's dive right into the salary question as far as the comps as well, and knowing your minimum. One of the questions that I hear the most from people are at the beginning, right? Even before we get to the negotiation phase of the interview process, is I get questions from recruiters like, what is your salary range? And people kind of sometimes tend to freeze up and don't know, should I answer it? Am I going to lowball myself? What if I do answer it? And then am I stuck? So can you get into a little bit about how to handle that so you position yourself well when we do get to the negotiation phase?
Absolutely. Yeah. So backing up a little bit from even that stage, I also hear, when do I bring up salary? I don't want to waste my time with an interview if they're not going to pay me my minimum, right? So my answer to that is get the interview and practice the interview. You never know. Maybe it'll turn into something higher than you were even anticipating. Don't bring it up unless the recruiter or the hiring manager brings it up. So wait for the question to happen. That's always just kind of holding your cards close to your chest. So when they do bring it up, to Christy's question, and by the way, most states have now, you can look into this in the state you're in to be sure, but most states have passed laws that require people to not ask you what you're currently making or what your historic salary requirements have, or earnings have been. So please be aware of that. So if someone asks you, what are you making right now? Just know if that's a legal question in your state. So if they ask you what your salary expectations are or what range are you looking for, often that will happen with a recruiter, someone not in the interview stage, right? So this is someone screening you at the very beginning. There's a few reasons they do this. I call it cracking the recruiter code. So everything I talk about comes from like the psyche of the recruiter and the psychology behind the why of the questions. So if they ask you, what is your salary range? First of all, they want to make sure they're not wasting their time, right? And they want to see if you've done your homework a little bit. So that's why know your minimum, know your role, know your comps. Always give a range. If you were to say just your minimum, that would be a really tough thing to negotiate later. So stating a range is the best. And I like to also offer the question back to kind of give the control back to the hiring manager or the recruiter, whoever's bringing up this question, to state, you know, the range I'm looking for is X to X. How does that fit into your budget? So if you ask that question, it puts the onus back on them to also answer so you can feel them out a little bit. And it gives them the control in the conversation, which they're always looking for that control, right? So approaching it as you're open to negotiating from the very beginning will set up the relationship really well.
Absolutely. One of the questions I have for you following up with that, and then Nick, I see you have a question in the chat, we'll get to that as well, is knowing your range and where you fit in, what your role is and where that fits in, you mentioned as one of the top 3 things to remember. What if a recruiter doesn't know kind of your value, right? Like, how do you explicitly let them know, like, yeah, I'm at the top of the range, right? Like maybe they can't see from your non-traditional experience that you'd actually be a really, really good fit and your value is at the top of that range. Is there any tips that you have on communicating that effectively so you can get that range that, you know, you essentially your worth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, that question is a little open-ended because it depends on where you're at in the interview process.
Okay.
So if we're talking about just that initial screening, hopefully your resume, your cover letter, your application, maybe you got a referral to get that conversation with the recruiter up front. They should already be excited to explore you further. And that's why they're asking you the question. That's also why asking them a question back, like, how does that fit into your budget? Does that work with the salary range that you've been given? Any of those types of questions will help you also determine where they're sitting. If you get an actual response of, "Oh, that's too high for us," or, "Oh, I've never heard this." So I would be shocked if this happened. So maybe we're just myth busting right now. If you ever had a recruiter say, well, you're not worth that much, I think you should report that recruiter. I don't think that's going to happen, right? So sometimes we have these fears going into it. And this is why I say also get comfortable talking about money. Say it out loud to your spouse or your partner or a friend multiple times so that you're comfortable when they ask you what is your salary range. Because usually what happens is it comes at you and you're just, maybe you didn't prep mentally or the mindset is not quite there. And so that's my recommendation prior to even having those conversations. If you can't say your minimum without shocking yourself, it's going to be hard for them to believe in your confidence, right? So the more you practice that and the more you say it out loud and the more research you've done will help you with that confidence. So throughout the storytelling of getting the job, so you're getting the interview first, that's your resume, that's your cover letter. You have already told them why you qualify for the job. Now they're just going to make sure that it's a fit both sides for the range that you're both looking for. Then you have your interviews. No talk of salary throughout your interviews. This is where you are showing how much transferable skills you have, how much experience you have. Please bring up your service. By the way, thank you all for everything you've done for my family's safety and for the country. Things that you have done in service should absolutely be part of that story. I know that's what Shift helps you all with. So having that confidence, bringing it up, making sure you're talking about it ahead of time, I think will help the most when you go to negotiate. And then if you believe you're worth it, it's going to authentically come across and make them believe it a little bit more too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The confidence in that. And so Nick asked a question. What are some of your recommendations in order to know your comps to find good salary comps?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So there's some really simple ones like Glassdoor. Hopefully a lot of the organizations you're looking at, they've been really accurate lately. I will say that for them. Salary.com is another one. So pretty simple things that you can research. You can even Google the job titles and usually a Glassdoor or salary.com will come up first, but you can find things that way. Sometimes LinkedIn will have the salary range that they've predicted if you've seen that before on job postings. And they're getting better. I would say don't put a lot of weight on what LinkedIn is doing yet. Their algorithm has some work to do. And then if you are going for a government position, federal, state, something that is public in nature, a lot of times you can find, for instance, city government. I'm here in Portland, Oregon. So Portland, Oregon has every salary you can think of for anyone that works for the city on their website. You just have to know how to search for it. So if it is a government role, it will be prominent. Usually it's even posted with the roles. But what you can do is if you didn't see a salary range, you can go to a comparable city and find a similar role and then pull that information. If it's a private job, but there's government roles that are comparable, my suggestion is to pull that government public information so that that's part of your research to see where the ranges are landing. So you've got your Glassdoor, your salary.com, and then you go to like a city site. Let's say you're an accountant. You go to city government in your area and you pull what accountants are making for the city government because everything's spelled out. And so now you have a few different places to kind of get that range.
Absolutely. So a lot of it is just doing your research, like understanding what's out there and being aware of that so you can communicate that effectively during your conversations.
Yeah. And I keep saying it, but being really understanding that you need to talk about it, talk to friends and family, find out from your peers what they're making. Some people it's taboo to ask about pay. I totally understand that, but the more and more people will talk about it, I think the more equity there will be within the job search and negotiation stages. So there are some companies that want to be really transparent, and then there's other ones that aren't. And that's just their culture. So the more that people that are working for those companies talk about it and share, the more transparent that they'll become too. So I would just, encourage you to talk to people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what if I'm pivoting into, let's say I'm either a transitioning service member, or maybe I'm just pivoting into a new career. I wanted to try, I want to try sales, and I was an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
How do I make sure I kind of navigate that process to get adequate compensation, to get me on a trajectory that I can continue to develop and grow appropriately salary wise?
Yeah, that's the toughest thing is when you're in transition, especially if you had so much knowledge in another area for salaries and now you're feeling like you're starting over. You might have to take a step back, right, to get that experience. Thinking about negotiations, we're talking about salary negotiation, but really it's compensation negotiation. And
Mhm.
a compensation package includes more than just your base salary. I always say try to negotiate that base salary because whatever you get at the beginning helps you later on, right? But I've seen more and more these transparent companies that probably a lot of you are wanting to work for are saying, you know what, this is all we can offer as our base salary. So their first offer, I've had a few clients lately that have been going for some really great companies and benefit companies, and they say, no, we're just going to be straight with you. This is our final and best. Okay, great. What other perks do you have? What other benefits come with this role? And there, there's a slew. You can Google this too. I'd be happy to share any information if you guys have specific questions about a certain role. But there might be stock options. What is the 401k match? What is the medical premium per month? Each person that comes to negotiation table has different priorities about what they and their family need. And that's why I believe negotiations still happen, because each person's different, right? So the base salary is one thing, but there's paid time off. Some people, instead of getting an extra $5,000 a year, they'd rather have an extra 2 weeks paid off, right? For more vacation time or travel. So there's a lot of things that go into the negotiations. So that's the first thing, is think holistically about all the priorities you have about that and make sure you get a comprehensive overview of everything that's included. Recruiters sometimes keep things close to their chest. For instance, there can be a perk, like a cell phone is included in a compensation package for certain roles, but they don't offer that up front. So always ask the question, is there anything else I should be asking about? Once you ask that question, the recruiter or the HR manager, whoever you're talking to, will then offer it up, right? So they might say like, oh yeah, actually we have a clothing allowance or a dry cleaning allowance. I doubt that's happening now with COVID, but some people do things like that too.
Awesome. So it sounds like what you're speaking about would be like a pre-negotiation call, right? Who is that? Is that something that like I have to initiate, or is it something, how do I go about doing that? And when do I do that?
Yeah, great question. Because I mentioned this earlier, don't bring up pay unless it's brought up with you.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is you want to make one ask.
Mhm.
So doing all that research prior to getting the negotiation stage is beautiful, right? You're in the interviews, make sure you're researching the heck out of it. You know how much these jobs are paying. You've got all your data in place. Then you get an offer. At that point, instead of sending your negotiation in writing right away, you definitely want to call whoever offered you the salary and the compensation. So pick up the phone and call them. Talk through all of that. You want to continue that relationship that you've already built through the interview stage, and you want to make sure that both parties are feeling like you want this to work out, right? So it's like a real estate agent who's in the battle. Christy and I were just talking about, we're both in the middle of this buying and selling situation with our houses. So real estate agent will pick up the phone and call the other agent prior to putting anything in writing to feel them out, see what's going on, maintain the relationship. Always make sure you tell them how excited you are, first and foremost. Okay. Now your amygdala and your stress receptors are going to like flare up and worry about how much you're going to get paid, how am I going to get through the negotiation? That's what's happening, right? Calm it down, pick up the phone, say, oh my gosh, you made my day. That's the first thing you want to do. You made my day with this job offer. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk about the compensation, and I have some questions. And that's a pre-negotiation call, because you're not negotiating yet. You're feeling them out and you're making sure that they feel your excitement, and that will also prime them that they're going to want to go to bat for you.
And does that happen to clarify, does that happen specifically between you and your hiring manager, or someone like in HR, or who would that happen with, that particular?
Yeah, it depends. So asking that question first, are you
Okay.
the right person to talk to? Yeah, thank you, Christy. You always want to ask that first. Say, I have some questions about the offer. Are you the right person to talk to?
Okay, great. Get clarity on that. All right, we have a couple of questions from the hotline. Michael, you asked if you want to add a little bit more color to that, feel free to come off mute. What's a typical salary range you said around 20K. Want to add a little bit more color behind your question there, Michael?
Sure. That's just that's what I've seen other people giving as examples, but some of these job postings that I've seen, it's a tighter range than that. So I'm just curious what you've seen.
Yeah, and are you saying for what they would offer as like when you're on Glassdoor or something like that, or what you would tell the recruiter? in
What
that
we would
scenario?
tell the recruiter.
Yeah. So 20,000 would be the maximum range I would recommend.
Okay.
Typically, it's more like a 10 to 15 spread.
Cool. Thank you.
And do you always offer at the top of the range, or what is the best practice for that? You don't want to offer at the bottom of the range, right?
Right. Well, and that's why you've done your homework.
Okay.
Mhm. And you see, you know your minimum. So your minimum should be the minimum of what you don't go below your minimum to do the range. So yeah, your minimum and above for sure. And just kind of know what that spread looks like in the industry.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then I think Jill has another question about compensation benefits. What are the new trends you are seeing in compensation benefits? Jill, if you would like, you can come off mute and add a little bit more context to that if you would like.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
So
Jill.
yeah, just what are you seeing as far as any new things out there that we would not really know to ask about? You know, I was looking at some of the company's websites and they talk about like snacks and stuff that really doesn't mean a whole lot, but are there some sort of compelling new trends that you're seeing that we should be aware of?
Yeah, let me rattle off a couple. First of all, if you've heard about the unlimited paid time off, there are some companies that are still offering that. I would say there's a catch-22 to it, and some companies have rolled that back because a lot of times when you get unlimited paid time off, you actually don't end up taking enough time off to rejuvenate. So I would just be a little leery about what that looks like and what the culture is and asking those questions. Yeah, Jonathan's experienced that. Well, thank you, Jonathan. You just acknowledged what I said. Yeah, because you still have to get the work done, right? So that's what their carrot is. We'll give you unlimited paid time off. However, you have to get your job done. And so some people don't feel like the culture allows them to unplug. So that is one trend that is still out for, I guess, research and to see how that's really going for people. So just keep your eye out for that. Another thing is with so many people remote and the uncertainty now with the variants and everything going on with COVID, there are a lot of companies that will give you devices or laptops or equipment to use. And I have seen some employers not offer that immediately. So just getting clarity around that, if you know you're going to work remote, especially, I would ask that question during the negotiation, and internet access as well. So anything that you have to pay out of pocket at home to do your work, I would just make sure that is all buttoned up and you understand what they do and don't offer. I mentioned cell phones. Some roles you just constantly need to be on the phone. So that would be another thing to ask about. As far as trends, those are the biggest things I've seen. I'm curious if anyone else has seen anything on the job posting. Michael's raising his hand.
I have a question about, I have a job that will require me to, or an interview for a job that would require me to drive around the city to a couple of different locations.
Mhm.
Is it typical to see like reimbursement for travel, things like that in packages?
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely ask, because some people put the onus on you because you can do that during your taxes if you itemize, right? So
Right.
you want clarity around that. Some companies will offer a stipend for a vehicle and maybe a gas card, things like that. And that is really nice because if they compensate you monetarily for, let's say, gas, this is a good example. If they compensate you for the gas, you usually get taxed on that. But if they give you a gas card, now it's just paying for the cost of materials, really the cost of the gas. So yeah, those are things that you should definitely ask for the nature of the job, anything that would be appropriate. And then Jonathan put fitness perks. Yep. Membership to gyms, you know, another thing that has changed a lot during COVID. So making sure that makes sense in your area. Mhm.
One of the
Yeah,
things
per
that I always-
diem. Oh, sorry.
oh, no worries. I was gonna say, one of the things that I always think is important specifically to me too is professional development
Mhm.
allocation. So especially if you're, you have a trajectory and a plan of where you're trying to get to go, seeing if it's aligned with the job, the employer should be happy to, offer that as part of
Yeah.
a benefit as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because you just reminded me, I was helping a client today with researching jobs, and there was one that surprised me because usually in education or places that are working in areas that are lower income, they'll do tuition reimbursement or student loan payback, right?
Mhm.
And there was a job that offered that, and it wasn't a traditional job that would do that. So keep your eye out for that too. That's also a really good thing to ask about during the negotiation. So I'm glad you brought that up, Christy. And when you're transitioning careers, it's a really good time. Like if they say, your experience is just not meeting that salary requirement that you're asking for, and so this is the best we can do, asking them to review you in X number of days, maybe it's 90 days, maybe it's 6 months, and reviewing you based off of your performance at that point, and then having an opportunity to negotiate your salary again. You can always ask for future date negotiations. So especially if it's a new career or a transition for you, that's a really good time to ask for that.
And is that something that you would want to make sure that you get in writing, or how to make sure that happens?
Always get it all in writing,
Okay.
for sure. Have the conversations, but then make sure you document it. Yep. Mhm.
Okay, interesting. Jill has another question for you. You can come off mute if you'd like to.
Yeah, Lisa, just wanted to know how long we can take to make a decision, because as they tell us, like the last 3 months are going to be really busy with doing interviews and stuff like that. So if you get a job offer,
Mhm.
but you have other irons in the fire, how do you handle that?
That's a great question. So first of all, always ask when your deadline is. So after you've got the final and best from the negotiation manager, recruiter, whoever that person is, HR manager, always ask, when do you need to hear my decision by? Okay. So that again puts the onus on them. Typically that's, a weekend or 72 hours at the most. Once in a while, they'll extend it if it's something they're not urgently hiring for, but that's typically what it is. So you do have a pretty narrow window to make a decision. What I say is don't worry about if you were to take a job and then another position came up, better salary, better opportunity for you and your family, and you want to take that other job, don't worry about how that's going to affect the company you just started with. It's about you. It's about your life and your livelihood, right? Now, it's really hard to think you're going to burn bridges or you're going to do something wrong in your career by moving to a different position. As long as you do it with grace and with kindness, and you make sure to let them know that you just couldn't pass up this opportunity, I say put yourself first. And this happens. It does happen. So recruiters, it's happened to them before. It stinks for them, but they get over it.
Any other questions from the crew?
Jill has another question about work from home, flex schedule. Yeah, actually, I'll give you examples. So I had a case study with a client recently who's moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. Big move to a much higher cost area. She negotiated more time before she had to show up in the office so that she could get the work from home and the flex schedule. And she did get that in writing. Now, there's going to be a lot of ambiguous, I can't say the word, ambiguous language around it right now for some companies, because it might be until we ask you to come in. that is something you can try and get stronger language where it's like indefinitely, right? Like from I'm going to have this position and 2 days a week I can work from home or whatever the case may be. But just be aware most companies are going to keep it pretty loose right now. I think a lot of them are still trying to figure out long-term, what are they going to do? If any of you have been tracking the news, like Google and a couple other big players recently made the decision that they're going to pay people less in lower cost areas. And there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes with that conversation. Where they're at typically, like Google in San Francisco, right? They're getting tax breaks. And so if all their people are working outside the city, now the city is not getting that money that they gave tax breaks in exchange for people living there. So there's going to be things like that that are coming up too, that are going to change it, where maybe you work from home, but you get paid less. I personally don't agree with that, but there's a lot of debate going on about the whys, and each company has its own unique situation. So probably a lot of language that's not going to be as concrete as you would like, but you can certainly ask for it and just make sure it's really clear in that conversation what you're looking for.
Again, get that, probably something to definitely get in writing there if it's up for debate.
Yeah.
Clifton, it looks like you have your virtual hand raised.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Lisa, Christy, for this great information. So for those of us who are pivoting into a new role, and we bring higher education, so they're asking for a bachelor's, you have a master's. They're asking for certain certifications, you have the next level certification. However, you don't have time in that, as we call it, time and service, time and grade, being in there. How does that work for negotiation? I have a higher education than you're looking for. I have the certifications that are higher than you're looking for. However, I just haven't done that job or that industry for a long time. How do you negotiate through that?
Yeah, great question. So only talk about the positives. Leave it off the table. Don't undercut yourself during the negotiation, right? So the first two things you said were perfect, and that's a really great story to tell. We talk about storytelling during a negotiation. I'm looking for X as my starting salary based on these reasons, and then list the reasons. And don't bring up the experience unless they want to talk about it. But yeah, higher education definitely qualifies for a return on investment. Certification levels for sure. Number of years of experience, if you do have them, even if they're transferable, comparable type, you can bring those up if it helps with the negotiation. And yeah, just don't even mention anything that you're feeling not confident about, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think that goes a little bit back to like knowing the role and where that fits in the company too, right? So you can, if it's a new industry you're possibly pivoting into, you can know the analogy for what you've maybe done in a previous role, or education wise, like what you've learned, and then kind of state your value, the value comp, because I have done this, or I have certification in this area, and you know the analogy, because especially if you have that experience in the military, they may not know that you've done that in a particular role because they're not they're not familiar with that title or whatnot. So doing the research and knowing where that role fits in and within the company, and knowing the terminology will help them, will help, them help you basically.
Yep. When the vernacular and the words you choose to use, yeah, definitely go a long way. And that's part of the storytelling. And when we speak to someone in their own language, it's much bigger impact, right? They understand it a lot more. So yeah, exactly. How do you translate what you've done into their language? And that's a really good part of your research for sure. Yeah. Oh, I like Jill's question. This is so she's asking about gender pay gap. It is still a thing. I have so many stories about my own experience in very gender gap industries, I will say. But that's another reason why I'm a huge proponent for the transparency and conversation. I will say it has shifted quite a bit in the right direction. And negotiating your salary as a woman, always, like everyone should always do it, but the statistics show that women negotiate less than men, right? So the number one thing to do is just make sure you're negotiating upfront at the beginning.
And what does that, if you can expand on that a little bit more, what does
Yeah.
a typical gender pay gap, it may not look like what it used to look like, right? Like it might be a little bit more in disguise nowadays. Like, what have you seen? Like, what does that look like and how do we circumvent that?
Yeah. What I have seen is typically the opportunities just not being there for women in comparison to men. And so once you get into a role, if you find out that you're getting paid less than comparable salaries of men next to you, definitely bring it up to HR. That's, things like that. If you are in a role and you're not getting opportunities for promotions, let's say, or opportunity to make more money, however that looks, sometimes the men negotiated better, for lack of a different word, because they're more comfortable with it. So the biggest thing I can say as far as advice is just negotiate, know your worth and negotiate it from the very beginning of your career and any transition you're doing. Because I've also heard recently, I'm on some advising boards for my alma mater, and one of the roundtables we did was with women coming out of college, and we were talking about negotiations, and they said, "Oh, my dad told me to just take the job and not negotiate." Like, I went, "What?" And so things like that are still happening in our culture, which is why I say just negotiate and know your worth and know the roles, and ignore the fact that you're a woman. Quite frankly, that's my best advice. Like, you're an employee and you have the same worth as anyone else doing the role. But the gap typically happens, just to expand on the technical side, because women start lower in their career. And so incrementally, they have not moved up the same. That's why I'm saying, like, negotiate at the beginning so that you're more on par, right? Most companies, there are very big rules against this. And so, like I said, I've got some experience, 18 years ago myself, where I found out men in the same role were making more than me. And I left. I got the heck out of there. I tried to negotiate and they wouldn't. And then the HR manager and I became friends, and she told me the reason they wouldn't negotiate is because I was a woman. So that happens. Now, that was 18 years ago. So that company doesn't exist anymore. So let's hope more and more just being fair.
So actually that leads me into a similar but different question. So what if I'm already in a role? You're already in the role. You may have negotiated for the role, but now you're looking to like kind of get to that next step. You've accomplished a few things. You've got some, not only the certification, education, you got some experience under your belt. Now what? How can I be the most prepared to get that raise? Or if I'm feeling like, well, I am being a little undercut in this role, I should be paid a little bit more. Like, what do I need to have in my back pocket in order to get to that next step to get paid fairly, whether or not I am paid fairly at this point, right?
Yep. So I'll go back to my 3 tips. Know your minimum, know your role, know your comps. Your role has changed, you've grown. Most likely you're an overachiever. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room works hard. And so you'll become more of a return on the company's investment or the organization's investment as you grow as a professional. And so knowing if your job title hasn't changed, but your role has significantly changed, or your job description has not been updated, take that upon yourself, do the research, find out what work are you doing that's comparable outside of this organization, know those comps, put it in writing, ask for a review, go to bat for yourself for sure. And if they do not appreciate you, go find another job offer that will. Use that as leverage if you really want to stay, or go somewhere where they appreciate you and will pay you the right amount for the work you're doing.
And if the result of that conversation is like, sometimes people could say, oh, maybe we'll review it or not at this time. Is there room for like kind of putting some information on the table to like get another date in writing for review when they say the time is right, perhaps?
Yeah, you can always try. Again, getting anything in writing for sure. I highly recommend that, and document an email after the conversation with your supervisor or whoever the decision maker is, right? So you might have a supervisor and a manager. Sometimes the supervisor can't help you and it falls short every time you talk to them. And you find out that actually the manager is the one who would have to sign off on a raise. Having that conversation and tell the supervisor, would like to talk to the manager about this.
Mhm.
I think everyone understands rank, right? So making sure you're not going around people and you're always going to talk to them or let them know that you're going to have the conversation is, of course, the most respectful thing to do so that it doesn't put any bad taste in anyone's mouth. But I will say at your current employer, there's a lot of power positioning that happens, right? So you are more apt to negotiate when you're getting a job offer than when you are internal.
Mhm.
And so that's why I say there's a time and a place where you might need to go external and
Mhm.
find that value and that job offer that will pay you what you're worth.
Mhm.
And if you really want to stay where you're at, use that as leverage. But sometimes if they come back and say, oh, well, now we'll pay you more, you have to really analyze that. Do they respect and appreciate you as much as you deserve?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Clifton, another question there?
Yeah, so to your point about negotiation, so how often do you look at the industry and say, it's time, and what percentage makes sense? So for us, like myself, I'll be going to an industry. So as I get more certifications, more whatever, is that the right time? I look at the industry every year, every other year and say, okay, is that the right time? Or do I say when it's 10, 3, 4, 5, 20% more, is that the right time? So that's kind of where I want to go with that one.
Yeah, great question. Again, it depends on your role in the industry you're in. Some industries are moving very quickly and might be changing more frequently, right? So for instance, COVID happens, all of a sudden the tech industry poof, blew out of the water, and there's demand for so many jobs that tech people are getting jobs and job offers left and right in the past year. Whereas the hospitality industry, so many people lost their jobs. And so if you're in a position of your industry changing, any pivot going on in the industry, definitely check out what's happening. Do quick job searches, go look at updated information. When you have, to your point, Clifton, when you get certified or let's say you obtain your master's degree and that's valuable for the role you're in, or something happens to your education level, that would be a good time to go out and look and see, again, knowing your role and what the comps are. I do recommend, just as a good kind of house cleaning, is like do it every year. Make sure you're just checking it out every year, feeling good, especially if your company does a cost of living increase or something on an annual basis, making sure that you're kind of checking in with the industry and making sure that's comparable. Some people say it's a performance increase, but really cost of living went up the same percentage. And so that's where, again, for you and your family, what makes the most sense? Maybe you can leverage something like more paid time off now because you're more tenured if they don't have a solid schedule of that, right? Most companies say after X number of years, you get this many paid time off days. Sometimes they don't, and that could be more of a negotiation tactic. So anytime there's a major change in industry or your role or your education, for sure, look it up. And then anytime, like beyond that, an annual basis is definitely a good marker. Mm-hmm. And then Jill had a question too. Is there a graceful way to use a competitor's job offer to increase your negotiation position with a company you may wish to work for? I'm going to say yes, Jill, but the way you worded it, may wish to work for, I'm going to ask a question. Do you have 2 job offers in front of you for this question? Is that the intention?
Yeah, I think hypothetically
Yeah.
you would.
Yeah, because some people will wait, they'll take a job offer and they'll wait for the other offer to come in before they accept, and then the deadline passes. So don't recommend that. Like, grab it because you don't have the other one in writing yet. Even if people have verbally told you it's coming, things can happen. So until it's in writing, don't lose out on other opportunities. That's my first recommendation. But absolutely, you can use that as part of your negotiation storytelling, right? So you're going to tell them the comparables, and you're also going to say, I have another job offer at a different organization for a similar role, and their offer included da da da. And then say, I would rather work for you. And then, is there any way to meet and match that? So you're going to ask the question, is there any way, put it on them. Just don't be like, hey, you have to give me this much money. So graceful for sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's all the questions in chat. Did anyone else have their hand up?
Some great questions. Anything else? We can come off mute and we can.
Does anyone have any job offers they're waiting for right now? They're like specific scenario.
Lisa, I have one. How dangerous is it for you to play that one against the other, or even disclose that in the negotiation process? Because sometimes, and I know not to ever lie about it or fake that you do have one, but
Right.
how does that work for you or work against you? Because I think that's a kind of a thin line you're walking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great question. So let's get into the psychology. Anytime you go into negotiation, you have to be ready to not get what you want. And the worst thing that can happen is they can say, this is our final and best offer. Mm-hmm. Because you've told them, I want to work for you, they're not worried that you're just going to jump ship, right? Because you've been honest and open about it. So what they will not do is just completely retract their offer. I think a lot of people have that fear anytime they go to negotiate. Like, well, if I ask for something higher, I'm just going to lose the job. Back to that college student analogy where the dad was giving to me bad advice. Just don't negotiate, just take the job. He had that underlying fear that they were going to retract the job offer from her. That will not happen. Clifton, to your point, always keep it confidential. Don't disclose which company, right? You could make, once in a while, they'll kind of ask for some kind of proof, but again, that is not going to happen typically. If it happens with commission or something, you can black out the confidential information and provide the rest of the document. But I have not seen that either. Usually it's just, they know their budget. They know how much they love you. They fell in love with you in the interview. The recruiter does not want to go back and go through that process all over again, right? So they're going to, if you're the candidate, they're going to try to go to bat for you as much as possible if it's on the recruiter. If it's the hiring manager that's negotiating with you, well, they fell in love with you even more than the recruiter did because they want to hire you. So know that you're in the power position to negotiate. And the worst they can say is, this is our final and our best offer. Kind of like a take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. And then you have to decide, are you going to take it or are you going to leave it?
I have one additional question. Whether it's the recruiter who asks or a hiring manager or HR at any point, if they ask you, are you also interviewing, or are you interviewing with other people? Now, is that behoove us to say yes or no, or who it is, and why are they asking that question?
Oh, that's a great question. It kind of depends on which stage you're in of the interview process. So there's recruiter conversations at the very beginning you may have, and typically it's with an external recruiter that will ask that question, because all the candidates they're talking to, the reason they're talking to you is you're a paycheck for them, right? So understanding what a recruiter is, that's external to the company. So they don't get paid by you, the company pays them to place you. So when you hear back from a recruiter, it means that they have placement that they think they're gonna cash out on you, right? So you're the paycheck. So sometimes they'll ask that while they're screening you to just kind of get a good gauge, like maybe you're neck and neck with another candidate per their opinion when they want to present it to a company. And they're like, I just want to know, I want to kind of gauge where you're at. First of all, if you are interviewing at other companies, you should disclose that for sure. And that could be a good thing. It could also be because then now all of a sudden you're desirable, right? Roto recruiters love, they want to find the unicorn. They want to find the person that they're going to get the paycheck for and that the hiring manager is going to fall in love with. So they want the cream of the crop. That's why a lot of times if you are interviewing and you're unemployed, there's ways to make it look like on LinkedIn, right, that you're still employed with a company. The reason for that is because a recruiter wants to find the cream of the crop that's already employed and snatch them away and get a paycheck, and they're happy at the end of the day. So if a recruiter is talking to you, that means that they see potential in you, that they're going to cash out on you. So sometimes they ask that in that stage. Later, it could be that they're just down to the wire of kind of knowing your schedule too. So sometimes the hiring manager might ask this of you because they want to know how quickly they need to turn on your job offer. So that might be one of the reasons they're asking. I have asked that question as a recruiting manager. So the hiring manager person, the one that would actually sign the job offer, not the recruiter, right? So the person at the end who's making that decision between the candidates. And I would ask it in a way of just finding out kind of timeline, and like, usually it's with another question of how soon can you start? There's no wrong answer to that question. They literally are asking just so they can start planning, especially managers, they're thinking ahead, right? And so they want to fit you in to their plan and make sure it makes sense. It's not, unless you say a year from now, it's not going to harm you, right? If you say, oh, I need to give 2 weeks at my employer, or I need to give 30 days at my employer per their policy, or because I have a lot of turnover, a project I'm finishing, say that, be authentic and let them know what's going on. It doesn't mean that you're compromising the job offer. It just means that you're being transparent and you're going to help them plan. And the more it feels like you're helping them, the better taste in their mouth they're going to have with you as a candidate.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I want to save, we have 2 more minutes left. If anyone has any other questions, let me know, but I do want to save a few minutes to quickly share my screen one more time so we can get your info out there. All right, can you see that? Awesome. And then I'm going to pop your LinkedIn in there as well. So
Great. Thank you.
as Lisa mentioned at the beginning, feel free to connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. Her website's also up there. I'll have to get that and paste it, but you take it from there. Just lisabertuccicoaching.com. So if you want to get in touch with her, that is how to. Any other closing remarks, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on a call, complimentary to any of you. So I usually do like a 30-minute complimentary session with anyone. So if you get to that point where you are negotiating and you just need some final eyes on it or conversation, or you just want to meet, I'd be happy to do a coffee chat. So yeah, please hit me up. Let me know that we were on this call together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. All valuable nuggets we're taking away today. So we are recording this, and we will be uploading it to the Slack channel, so everybody can have access to that as well. And don't forget the three what do you call them? The three
no's, I guess. The 3 no's. That's really funny.
The know your minimum, know your role, know your comps.
Mhm.
So we'll walk away with today.
Awesome.
So
Well,
thank you so
all.
much.
Great. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, great questions. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's continue to talk. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to help.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending the last Communicating Your Value session of the month. And we'll see you later, and we'll see you on Slack. Have a good night. Ciao.